mohaka te awa, ko haururu te maunga, ko ngati pāhauera te hapu, ko ngati kāngunu te iwi, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. You know, back in the 1950s when I was growing up in this little place called Raupunga on the east coast of the North Island, I could never imagine that one day I'd use a thing called a computer, go on a thing called the internet, to a place called Google Earth, to take you back to the house I was brought up in, without electricity. So we had no electricity. Mum cooked on a coal-fire range. Dad listened to Life with Dexter on a battery-powered radio, and we used to read our comics by using the light of a flash lamp. And you know, people sometimes I wonder, how does a fellow like this get to a place like this? Because I wasn't even all that good at school. I wasn't good at maths, I wasn't good at physics, and I didn't even know how to spell algebra. And then I went out. You know what my first job was? I was a singer in a rock and roll band. Ooh, hey, look at the gear. Singer in a rock and roll band. Then I got called up in the army. So I did the army, and then I got out, and then I thought, oh, maybe I better get serious and go and get a degree. So I went and got a law degree. So there we go. I got a law degree. And I was just, you like the wig? I was just about to go out and get a job in a law office when somebody offered me a job on television. And I thought, law, television, TV's going to be way better. So I just went and started working in TV. Now, back in 1989, and most of you wouldn't have been born then, I ran into this group of people, 4 of them. They were from Otago University, and they'd just been to America and won the World Computing Champs. They were the first non-American university to ever win the champs. They beat Stanford, Harvard, Caltech, all the big guns, they beat them. So we kind of sat there and had a bit of a chat, and I thought, why don't we start a technology company? And I know nothing about technology. Why don't we start a technology company here in Dunedin, and we'll take on the world from here. We're never going to leave. Now, one of the really cool things about being in Dunedin, we're at the bottom of the world. Next stop is Antarctica. So it means you don't know what you don't know. So back in 1992, we set out and just did stuff for the fun of it. We changed the way the world saw America's Cup. I took up golf, said get me to all the best golf tournaments in the world. We're only 2 companies in the world allowed to do the DRS for cricket. We built a Formula One simulator for one of the world's leading F1 teams. We built an air traffic control simulator that they use to train air traffic controllers all over the world. And for our friends at Whale Watch Kaikoura, we drained the Pacific Ocean. And I apologise for this, but because we're from Dunedin and because we could, we just went and blew up Auckland. So people look at all of those pictures there and goes, how does this little Māori fella who didn't do any technology, didn't do any maths, doesn't understand, how did you get to do all this? Well, I used to always say the answer was simple. I just surrounded myself with really clever white people. There they are. And you know, for 20 years or more, I believed that because, you know, I was just this Māori fella. We weren't clever in this stuff, so it must have been these clever white people that I worked with. But a couple of years ago, I heard a lecture from this professor here, Lisa Mataso-Smith. It was called From Africa to Aotearoa. She used DNA to study all the stories of the great migration of humans starting 80,000 years ago out of Africa and ending up here in Aotearoa. And here's what she said about the migration of the Pacific Ocean, the migration of our tupuna. This Polynesian navigation is one of the greatest feats in human history. I think it is something that all humans should be proud of. And I think, actually I've got to say hello to my mates there from Pass College. Yeah, I think you're out there. Hello everybody. But I think that is a really important, but here, I'm going to take you back to my school because I never heard that story and my mum and dad taught at this school. Oh, there you go. Now both my parents taught here. My mother, Mangu Rose Kaimoana, Pahuera Ngati Kahungunu, and my father, Bernard John Taylor, whose great-grandparents had come here from Scotland.
At least that's the way it was when the reenactment of Captain Cook's landing at Anara Bay on Saturday, October the 20th.
It was here that I first learned of the footsteps laid down by my ancestors, my Pākehā ancestors, the Vikings, the Scots, and Captain Cook, the great English navigator who, I was told, sailed all the way from England to discover New Zealand. But what I was never taught was the amazing story of the footsteps laid down by my other tupuna, my Polynesian ancestors who sailed to this land 500 years before Captain Cook. As a boy, I never realised that even before the Vikings had launched their ships across the seas to Britannia, the Polynesians had already launched their waka haurua across the massive Pacific Ocean, destined ultimately for Aotearoa. They crossed a third of the planet in state-of-the-art sailing craft, guided by the stars and the ocean currents. To make it to these shores across Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, the tupuna on my mother's side had to be more than just sailors. They had to be astronomers, astrologers, scientists, engineers, mathematicians. They had to be innovators. And the voyage they made, as we are only just beginning to discover, is arguably the greatest story of human migration in the history of mankind. And it is the greatest story of human migration in the history of mankind. It's our story. It's your story. But here's the thing. If you go to Google and type in the map of human migration, this is what you get. Look at that. See that big bit in the middle there? That's the largest expanse of open water on the planet. Te Moana Nui a Kiwa. It is so big that you can fit every continent on Earth inside it. It's enormous. It is so big you can fit Mars inside it. But when you go to Google and look at the map of human migration, it's like nobody has ever been there. Our ancestors had not been there. And this is how, for a long time, our ancestors arriving here, this is how they were described. This is the famous Goldie painting that said back then, well, these brown people here in this island when Captain Cook turned up, they couldn't have been clever enough to come here on purpose. But let me share this and ask Noinoi Barclay Kerr, who is a sailor of Waka Haurua, to tell this story properly.
"120 years ago, two Pākehā, Goldie and Steele, made this painting. They called it The Arrival of the Māori in New Zealand, and it became famous, hanging in the Auckland Art Gallery for years. The Māoris? I'm Māori. But these aren't my ancestors. The painters made them up. They made up the waka too, and they copied the whole look of the painting from a French fella called Jericho. Look at how crazy hungry these exotic savages are. We're dead. We're dying. We're so lucky we stumbled upon land. Māori settlement of Aotearoa was no accident like the painting reckoned. It was a choice based on knowledge. And it worked because we could navigate using the natural world, and we had the waka to safely get us here. We watched migrating seabirds heading south, and we sent our great explorer Maui and our great voyager Kupe to follow their path. They found this land and returned home to Hawaii with directions. Then a new wave of migration began. What this painting does tell us is that Europeans back then knew so little of our true awesomeness. Sadly, the more famous the painting got, the more people, even our own people, believed it to be true. I mean, looking at the painting, I kind of like some of the expressions. This guy over here looks like me when someone eats the last of my nuggets. No! But like a superhero movie, it's not real. What is real is that we were skilled enough to find this land and skilled enough to thrive here. We've got innovation in our DNA. We've got innovation bursting right out of us. That's our superpower. Da-da-da!
And so this is how our ancestors travelled. And 2 years ago, 2019, we joined this waka from Tahiti, coming 4,000 kilometres from Tahiti to New Zealand, skippered by this 25-year-old wahine called India. So we got on board there. So she came from there with her crew to travel in the footsteps of Maui and Kupe. So we put a whole lot of gear to track to see how well she did. So here she is sailing 4,000 kilometers from from Tahiti to New Zealand, and that's the line that we thought she should carry. That's what she's doing, using nothing but the stars, sun, and ocean currents. That's how she did it, and I love this because this is the think tank on the back of the boat. 3 women, there's India, and the one over there on the right-hand side, that's Moita. She is the celestial navigator who used the stars, sun, and ocean currents to make that incredible journey. So we had a crew on board. Isn't that amazing? That's us. That's your tupuna. And all you girls out there, that's the think tank, the 3 women on the back of the boat. So, we talk about this thing called STEM. And, everybody says Pacifica and Māori don't perform very well in STEM. Well, maybe that's because we're calling it the wrong thing. It should be mātauranga. STEM is just a small part of a bigger thing that's in our DNA. Mātauranga is all of those things. And you do not cross the Pacific Ocean if you don't understand science, technology, engineering, and math and innovation. That's in your DNA. And so we're calling all of this Mātauranga, and we have built a website so that we can share these stories now, because I think the reason maybe we don't perform so well, and I didn't perform well in this stuff way back there, is because no one told me this story. That stops now. This story is now being gifted to everyone in New Zealand, in the islands, and all over the world in a site we've called mātauranga.co.nz. So I'm just going to go quickly through it, but you go on, so check it out, so jump on board. Innovation is in our DNA. We've got 2 chapters to start with, The Land of Voyages and Kiwi Can Fly, and we've linked that to the America's Cup. So when you go into The Land of Voyages, you get all these stories, videos that kind of carry on and take you through. You go to the teacher's resources, and there we go. So now you can look through all of those stories. Let's take this one. How did they find their way? Well, Noi will take you to a wonderful story about the Jedi Knights of their time. They were the celestial navigators. They were amazing. They were trained to understand and deliver all of this. And there's more stories about the star compass, which is where the Polynesians totally understood the stars, the universe, astronomy, and astrology. We've got experiments running there. There's things to do. So I'm just going through quickly. And then we come to the America's Cup. And one of the really cool things here is, again, the reason we opened this with the America's Cup is that when you look at all those footsteps, the Waka Haurua was one of the state-of-the-art craft ever built. It was the first catamaran ever built. Our tupuna built it. And there's an unbroken line all the way through to that amazing boat called Te Rehutai that we saw racing. That's in our DNA as well. And what I love up here, there's Elise. So you'll get all of these stories on the website, but there's the extraordinary Elise. Elise was one of the lead science designers of Te Rehutai. She also, at the age of 19, designed all of the airflows over the top of those guys who rode the bike on the boat that won the America's Cup. So that's Elise, a fabulous story. The next thing we're going to do is add another thing called Papatua Nuku Breathes, and that's going to start teaching about how Mātauranga can help us save the planet, how we do all that stuff and the things. So I won't go into too much depth because I've only got a little bit of time here, but that is all there on the site. And what we want to do is we've designed it with the principle of ako. There are no teachers, there are no students. We are all students, we are all teachers. So this is a gift to all of you, and what we want you to do is start taking it, working with your teachers, and start showing us how you use it. Send to us so we can put it on the website so schools all over the country and around the world can take the lessons that you're finding from this and sharing it with everybody. So that brings me back to those really clever white people. Now that I look and I'm learning this story for the first time, I'm 71. And it's taken me this long to learn this story. It's way too long. I have moko aged 4 and 1. And I'm going to make sure that when they grow up, they do not have to wait till they're 70 to hear these amazing stories of science, technology, engineering, math that is mātauranga. But there's a really great saying from one of our great elders, Sir Aparana Ngata. So instead of surrounding yourself with clever white people, this is what he said to his 9-year-old granddaughter. Grow up, young child, and throughout your life, use the tools that Pākehā has to offer as your lodestar to creative inspiration. Now, what's his name? Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs never realized it when he made the touchscreen, that he was actually making a tool for us, for Pacifica and Māori, because we never used pencil and paper to write our stories down. We used the arts. It was oratory, it was waiata, and we tutued with our hands. So he gave us the tool, and you are now using those tools. You are the most fabulous storytellers. This stuff is in your DNA. Take those tools that Pākehā have to offer and go blow their socks off. Because here's what happens. Just to close, I'd like to share with you what happened when this little Māori fella from Rauponga got together and started to use the tools that Pākehā has to offer. This is what we do around the world today. So I finished with the America's Cup because that is in our DNA. Our voyagers, our tipuna, were the greatest sailors in the world. And Pete and Blair sailing Te Rehutai were honouring that tradition, that knowledge. And just to close, this I want to share with you. This is the message from two rangatahi which gives me so much faith in where you will be able to take us.
It's about learning now what it takes to keep this waka, our planet, moving well.
We are all responsible for what we have, the entire world, you know, and to keep it going on for the next generation. Like, it's not like just a Māori or Pacific responsibility to protect, but it's whoever lives in it. And it's for all the other oceans, you know, that we're all connected. It's just, where is that connection? And I think that's what Tuia has done for us, is started the conversations in terms of where we can find those connections and how we can build on those connections.
This is where it ends, at a new beginning, Mahia, the very first place to see the light of day, and now, in partnership with Pākehā, a place where today's state-of-the-art waka are being sent back to the very stars that brought us here. Isn't it amazing how far we've come and how far we can still go?
So, the world is yours. So I'm, anybody, I know we haven't time for questions, but anybody who wants to catch up, I'm staying here all afternoon. I'll be down and things, so please come and Kōrero. Thank you.